Welcome back to another episode of I Wish They Knew, a show where we share big ideas that deserve more attention in about the time it takes to enjoy a cup of coffee. I'm Joe Hirsch. Today's wish comes from Eric Stone. Eric spent more than 2 decades as a senior leader at Enterprise and was one of the rental car company's most decorated regional vice presidents. Eric's also the founder of ClearPath Ventures, which specializes in helping young professionals and businesses chart their path to success. And he's the author of a great book. I just finished it earlier today called Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture, a Roadmap for Igniting High Performance, something we all need more of today. Eric, welcome to the show.
Joe, pleasure to be here. Thanks for having me as a guest.
So what do you wish more people knew, especially when it comes to creating great cultures?
Well, I think there is this misunderstanding of culture. So everyone thinks it's soft and philosophical, hugs, high fives, built on these rousing speeches. And that is important, don't get me wrong. But if I had to say what I wish people knew is great leaders take empathy with accountability. And they have high character with high standard. And culture truly becomes the catalyst to execution within an organization and is really important during those difficult times. It almost acts as a shock absorber for your organization when those times come.
We used to live in Texas, and I remember Texas A&M had this saying that it used to describe its culture. From the outside looking in, you can't understand it. From the inside looking out, you can't explain it. I thought that was so true, because culture is something that we feel and we understand, but it's hard to define. So how can organizations capture and communicate their culture?
Yeah. Well, at first, if I had to define it, behaviors in action is the simplest thing that I can come up with. When you're communicating, there's so many layers to that. I like to talk about 5 key factors an organization can do, and communication is one of them. The first is they must encourage relationship building throughout the organization. The second comes to what you're talking about. You must clearly communicate your goals and expectations, and you must balance the how often you're going to do something with the what setting. Is it daily, weekly, monthly, quarterly, bi-yearly, annually? With the what setting? Is it virtual, in-person, over an email, Slack channel, project management system? And so those are crucial that you understand it. And then allowing them to have the right material and equipment and information in order to achieve the desired outcome so they can be successful based on what you're asking. Personally, professionally developing what they're all about, learning and to unlock their potential, and then rewarding and recognizing top performance.
So you talk about complexity as a culture killer, which I thought was really important. And you suggest that leaders can lift their cultures by simplifying their communications. On that topic of how to simplify communication, what should leaders be doing more of? You've got this really nice, handy way for them to do that.
Well, so when it comes to communicating in general, there's the ABCs of communicating information. You know, the simplest version is the A is the amplify. Amplify is how do you take we would call them non-negotiables, maybe your commitments, your 3 to 5 key priorities, and how do you get it throughout your entire organization? The B is they're great at buffering the information, meaning they become almost those distraction catchers. So they can take that 5-page essay and synthesize it to a 5-sentence piece where it begins to be a little bit more clear. And they know how to convey the information. The did you knows, the ESPN did you knows, the summer picnics are this day, the holiday parties that day, pass alongs. Behind me, you'll actually see a good approach to the culture building process. And it's going to be hard to see because it's a little small in the image, but it's the hourglass approach. Joe, and this is not an eyeglass that me and you both have, and I've been wearing since I was probably 7. It is an hourglass, which is OUR, bringing everyone together. And if you notice, for most organizations, the easy version is the top, the discovery period, where you're pulling information from your customers, clients, stakeholders, employees, of course, and gathering all of this information, to which eventually where the hourglass comes out, you're going to start orchestrating what those 3 to 5 key priorities under the amplify we were talking about, right where it gets to the hourglass, where the hourglass is thinnest. That's what we are trying to communicate. Very clear. It is not a flavor of the week. And then it must come out. And this is the reinforcement. As the culture comes out, I call this really the training and reinforcement. As it is bowing out, you're giving all of this information through your training, the employee journey that an employee will go through. So there are so many touch points where it is hard not to understand what those 3 to 5 key priorities are. And when the sand hits on the bottom, there is an assessment period. That is where you're going to evaluate or attempt to measure the health of your organization. Those are pulse surveys, engagement surveys, or whatever you're using to try to measure it. On each side of an hourglass, what's really important through that process, one side is going to have your policies and procedures. Those are going to help you with your decision-making, as well as the other side is your mission, vision, and values. Those are the 2 pillars that are really important to guide you along. Now, with anything, it's new technology, a pandemic, something's going to happen. You'll turn that hourglass over and figure out throughout that approach, where are you in that culture building journey? So that's a long way of saying a nice, simple approach to get the message through all levels.
I like the analogy, and it works because an hourglass really is all about how do you control time, making sure that the message is timely and that it's the right thing at the right time as opposed to the right thing at the wrong time.
Yeah, it allows everyone to be in alignment, as you'll hear a lot of people say. But this is the importance when we talked communication earlier, is if it's empathy is your new training program, how do you get empathy to truly be embedded from the hiring process to the training process to the review process, to make it really important where it's hard not to understand what empathy is like? And do you use those videos that truly show the behaviors about empathy that allow me to do that repeatedly over a difficult situation? And do we recognize that empathy, if that were the example, as I mentioned with those 5 key factors? How do we now reinforce and recognize those efforts and reward the performance for those who do it?
Okay, so culture is a design process, it's a strategy, as you've mentioned, but it's also created by the people. And you say that it's better to hire for match rather than fit. Why is
Yeah.
that more than just semantics?
Yes. So the analogy I'll give you, Joe, is when you go to work and you have this beautiful tie, okay, for maybe a male who's wearing a tie. And the tie just, it makes the shirt, the jacket, the pants, it just makes everything better. And so you're looking for those who are not only going to be a customary fit, which would be like a size 9 shoe. I'm looking for the size 9, that not an 8, not a 10, but a 9. And so match is fit. It's like the head and the heart. It's so much more. And it allows the diversity of thought, diversity of ethnicity, the diversity of generational perspective to come out, and power in numbers.
Okay, so it's more than just people who will sit neatly inside a culture, but it's people who can actually go ahead and shape the culture as well.
I call, once you get that right person within the door, are the culture carriers. Those are the ones who truly are going to carry out the message. And you have to, within an organization, have some sort of program that allows people who are doing the work to have a voice. And as they contribute, and I used to meet with mine every other month, and they were literally assigned by their peers. And it was a strategic way to say, what am I missing? Don't just agree with me. I need you to challenge my thoughts and thinking. What do we need to do to create the right culture or vision and strategy that we're living in? And what do we need to be prepared to in the future that we might not be thinking of? And so, yes, these culture carriers, those who are within the brick and mortar of the 4 walls they serve, and it starts there. I mean, I guess technically the values and the message may be from me, but it only goes so far if you don't have these carriers.
Yeah, those are the ones who amplify and serve as ambassadors for the brand and for the living values of an organization. I'm wondering how you screen for match. I mean, that must be a hard thing to capture. What are some ways you did that?
So there were a few. I think the first thing is, what questions are the key questions that are truly going to be important for the role that they're going to have? For example, some of my questions were as simple as, tell me your story. I wanted an unprovoked version. I didn't want to say anything of what I was looking for. I wanted them to tell me, and I wanted to build trust that they could be who they are. People get very nervous in an interview. My job, in effect, was to make them feel comfortable where the true piece of them comes out. I wanted to know, were they someone who could be persuasive, empathetic? Were they someone who's not afraid to ask a question? And so we would have set questions along the journey from interview 1 to interview 3. It was also really important not only to have the right questions, but to train your team of how to ask clarifying questions and truly listen through an interview. We sometimes get the halo and horn effect in an interview where we just fall in love because they play baseball and I played baseball, and I can get derailed easy. So it is questions, it is training. And then we used to have a creative little, I don't want to say a trap, but to find out who someone was about, my executive assistant or HR manager would greet the individual who was coming in. And this is under the assumption that it was, in person. And they would just introduce themselves. They would not say their title. And I wanted to see how they would be treated. And that wasn't, of course, the only decision that would happen, but that was an important decision. So a little pre-screening, the right questions, clarifying questions, the right training are just a few to truly get the match, the person who is going to make us even that much better.
Yeah, I like that idea of a mystery greeter, someone who can sort of serve as an example of how you might treat other people within the organization. And if you can't treat them nicely during an interview process, who knows where that ends 5, 6 months down the road.
Joe, I used to also have a question that didn't have a right or wrong answer. I wanted to see, are they going to hold their line to what they truly believe in? As you can see, what right above me is the believe. I wanted to get them a little uncomfortable so I can see how they would handle a situation that might not be perfect. And that was really important for me to see who they truly were. For example, is the customer always right? I truly don't believe the customer is always right. They just have to get and feel like they're always right. But, how do they handle those things?
I like that. So the real test of culture happens when no one is watching. So what can organizations do to make sure that they're not just listing their values, but actually living them?
I think that will start with me. And so if I am going to be someone who says strengthen our community and community involvement is really important, yet I'm not on a board or I don't partake in our volunteer projects that I have, I'm just more of a talking about it. And so you cannot, each value, the recommendation I give organizations is look at your 5 or however many values you have, and how many of those do you actually reward? And so, for example, if customer service is truly important, we created what was called the Johnny the Bagger Award, because we wanted people to truly demonstrate their personal signature on every interaction. And it was just a great story about Johnny, who was a bagger who had Down syndrome, and how he transformed or helped transform an organization just by his actions. And we wanted all the behaviors within our organization to be like a Johnny. And if customer service was our way of life and is really important, then don't we want to recognize it? And so those are ways that it starts with me demonstrating, it starts with me recognizing and rewarding those things and those actions.
So you have to value your values.
You would have to value those values. Well said.
The book is Jumpstart Your Workplace Culture, and the author, and he jumpstarted some really thought-provoking ideas about culture today, is Eric Stone. Eric, thanks for sharing your wish with us today.
Joe, thanks for having me.